Have you ever felt like the happiest moments in your life are the ones you ruin the fastest you fall in love, then start finding reasons to leave? You land the job and suddenly can't get out of bed. You make a promise to change and break it quietly the next day. Maybe you've told yourself you're weak, broken, undisciplined. But what if it's not about weakness at all? What if it's loyalty to the version of you that once got hurt and never got a chance to speak? What if the part of you that sabotages everything is actually trying to save you? There's a reason you've never felt fully free, and it might not be what you think. Because inside every act of self-destruction is a whisper, "Don't let me get hurt again. There's something I want to show you." But it's hidden in a place you've spent your whole life avoiding. That place has a name. And once you see it, truly see it, everything begins to change. Ethan never thought of himself as someone who ran from love. But if you looked closely, there was a pattern. Every relationship that got close, he'd start to disappear, pulling away slowly at first, then all at once. There was always a reason: too busy, not ready, not the right match. But deep down, he knew it wasn't about them. It was him. He'd meet someone kind, warm, real. And just when it started to feel good, safe, whole, he'd feel it, that rising anxiety in his chest, the urge to protect himself. Even when there was no threat, he would sabotage it, miss a call, cancel plans, say something he didn't mean just to push them away, then hate himself for it. This wasn't just about love. At work, the same thing. He'd be praised for his creativity. His ideas would light up the room. And then he'd go dark, miss deadlines, stop replying. It was like the moment something started to shine, he couldn't bear it. Not because he didn't want to succeed, but because he didn't believe he could stay there. There was a voice in him, quiet, constant. "You don't belong here. They'll find out. It'll all fall apart anyway. Might as well leave first." It felt like protection, but it left him empty. He'd stand in front of the mirror some nights, brushing his teeth, staring into his own eyes, and ask himself, "Why do I keep ruining everything that matters? Why do I run from what I say I want?" There wasn't an answer, just the same silence. Until one day, a friend suggested therapy, not for a crisis, just to understand. He hesitated at first, but something in him whispered, "Try." So he went, sat on that soft beige couch, eyes on the window, not the therapist. And he said the words he'd never said aloud. "I think I'm the one who breaks everything good in my life, and I don't know why." And for the first time, he didn't feel judged. He felt seen, and something began to shift, not loudly, not suddenly, but like a small door inside him just began to creak open. And behind that door was something he never expected. Not answers, but memories, and a shadow that looked a lot like him. He remembered a time when he was 8, sitting at the dinner table, legs dangling from the chair, a drawing in his hand. He had spent hours on it, colored every corner with care. It was a picture of their family, smiling, holding hands. Even the dog was there. He handed it to his father with a proud grin. His dad glanced, then frowned. "This isn't the time for this, Ethan. We're eating. Sit properly." Something inside him folded, not because of the words, but the tone, flat, cold, final, like joy didn't belong at the table, like he didn't belong with joy. From that night on, he stopped showing his drawings, stopped interrupting, stopped shining. And every time he did feel proud of something, the image of his father's furrowed brow returned. A small moment, but it carved a rule in his body. Don't be too much. Don't take up space. Don't expect warmth. His mother, loving in quiet ways, tried to soften the edges. But the house had rules no one wrote down. Silence was safer, success was survival, and emotions, they were wild animals, better left outside. That little boy, with his eager smile and bright colors, he didn't disappear, he just hid, and the man Ethan became. The one who ran from love and success was built on those silent instructions. He learned to overthink every text, to rehearse every sentence, to stay one step ahead of rejection, even if it hadn't arrived yet. In therapy, when the question came, "What's your first memory of being told you were too much?" he almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it landed like a stone in his chest. He hadn't thought about that dinner in over 20 years, but now it was loud again. That moment, that tone, that folded paper left on the table, untouched, and for the first time, he didn't dismiss it. He let it sting, let it ache, let it open. The therapist didn't rush him, just nodded and said, "Sometimes the body remembers what the mind forgets," and that sentence was a key, not to unlock the past, but to meet the boy still sitting inside it, waiting, with a drawing in his hand, and a heart still hoping to be seen. If you've ever carried a quiet pain like that, a memory too soft to be called trauma but too sharp to forget, you're not alone. And if it feels right, share your moment in the comments. You never know who might need to hear they're not the only one, still holding a folded piece of paper, waiting for someone to look and smile. It started with a question. Have you ever heard of the shadow self? Ethan shook his head. He had come to therapy to fix things, not talk about shadows. The therapist smiled gently. It's a concept by Carl Jung, not a monster, not a flaw, just the part of you that was never welcomed. That sentence lingered, never welcomed. Ethan didn't like it, but it felt true. The therapist continued. Every time you were told to be quiet, be less, be good, the parts of you that didn't fit were pushed down. They didn't disappear, they just went underground, and that is your shadow. Ethan sat still. It sounded poetic, but unsettling. He wasn't used to thinking of his past as alive, much less active. What does it do? He asked. The reply was simple. It protects you by sabotaging what feels unsafe, even if it's what you want most. Ethan blinked. You mean the reason I destroy things is because a part of me thinks it's saving me? Yes. From what? The therapist leaned in. That's what we'll find out together, that night. Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay awake, thinking about all the moments he'd called himself weak, broken, hopeless. What if he wasn't any of those things? What if he was just loyal to an internal protector who had never grown up, a child soldier of his own survival? That thought broke something in him and softened something else. He remembered all the times he pulled away from someone who cared and realized it wasn't fear of them leaving, it was fear of them staying, because staying meant being seen, and being seen meant risking rejection. Again, he began to wonder, what if his self-sabotage wasn't failure, but grief? Grief for the parts of himself he had exiled to stay safe, the rage that wasn't allowed, the longing that went unanswered, the need for love that got labeled too much. And suddenly, the word shadow didn't feel dark. It felt familiar, like a name for something he had always known, but never dared to call by name. He looked in the mirror again that night, not with shame, but curiosity. Who are you? What are you still carrying? And are you ready to come home? The assignment was simple. Write a letter, his therapist said, to the part of you you dislike the most. Ethan stared at the blank page that night. The room was quiet, the lamp hummed, and still. He couldn't move his pen. He didn't know where to start or who exactly he was writing to. Was it the anger, the fear, the version of him that always ran? He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and wrote, "Dear Rage, I hate you. You ruin everything. You speak before I think. You push people away. You slam doors I'm still trying to open." But then the pen slowed, and something else came. "But I know you didn't show up alone. You were born the day I wasn't allowed to cry, the day I was told, be a man. The day I swallowed tears until they turned into fire. You weren't trying to destroy me. You were trying to protect what was left of me. Ethan's hand trembled, but he kept going. Dear shame, you're the quiet one, the one that hides behind my smile. You whisper things no one hears and I believe every word. I never invited you, but you moved in so young. And now I don't know how to live without you. You make me shrink, make me second-guess every kindness, because somewhere inside you still believe I don't deserve it. And maybe a part of me agrees that letter took 2 hours, not because it was long, but because it was honest. And after he finished, he cried, not the kind of cry that breaks, the kind that cleans, like something had been waiting years to be said, and now it could rest. He read the letter in therapy. His voice cracked. His hands shook, but the therapist didn't interrupt, didn't offer solutions, just listened. When he finished, she said, "That was the first time your shadow felt heard." The days that followed were strange. He found himself softer, quieter, not because he was trying to change, but because something inside had stopped yelling. It had finally been seen. If you've ever written a letter you never sent, or wanted to, maybe this is the moment. You don't need the right words, you just need to start, because the part of you you've buried the deepest might just be waiting for your handwriting and your voice, saying, "I see you, I'm listening." The night after writing the letters, Ethan couldn't sleep, not just because of emotion, but because something in his body felt unsettled. His chest was tight, hands cold, thoughts racing without direction. He kept replaying the words he had written, over and over, as if his body didn't know whether to feel relief or fear. He had expected peace, but what came was panic. It was as if, by opening the door, the room inside him erupted. The next morning, he told his therapist, "I think I made it worse." She shook her head gently. "No, you made it honest." Then she said something Ethan wouldn't forget. Shadow work doesn't start with healing. It starts with surviving what surfaces. He looked at her, confused. "I thought this was supposed to help." "It will," she said. "But first, the parts of you that were silenced need to speak." That week, Ethan's body became louder than his thoughts, a constant buzzing in his limbs, dreams filled with chasing, memories he hadn't remembered in years. It felt like his shadow, now awakened, didn't want to go back into hiding, and maybe he didn't want it to, he just didn't know what to do with it. The therapist suggested something radical. Try to fix it. Just sit with it. Ethan scoffed. Sit with panic, with shame. "Yes," she said. "Like you would sit with a scared child, not to scold it, but to let it know it's not alone." So that's what he tried. One night, during a wave of anxiety, he sat on his living room floor, dim lights, phone on silent, eyes closed, and he whispered, "I'm here. I don't know what you need, but I won't run this time." And then he waited. No magic, no sudden calm, but something subtle. His hands stopped shaking, his breath found rhythm, and in that quiet he heard a thought he hadn't had in years. "You're not weak for feeling this. You're brave for staying." He didn't call it progress. He didn't label it as healing. He just sat, and for the first time, that was enough, because the shadow wasn't demanding change. It was asking for company. If your body has ever screamed when your mouth stayed quiet, if you've ever felt panic without cause, maybe it's not irrational, maybe it's memory, waking up and asking, "Will you sit with me?" Just a little longer. It came in a dream. Ethan was back in his childhood home. The living room was dim, dust floating through the light like tiny ghosts. He was small again, barefoot, quiet, watching. There was a door at the end of the hallway, one he'd never noticed before. Old, wooden, paint chipping. He felt drawn to it, and terrified of it. He reached for the knob. But just before he could touch it, he woke up, heart pounding, breath shallow. The image clung to him all morning. That door, the one he never opened. In therapy he described it. The therapist leaned in. Do you know what's behind it? Ethan shook his head. I'm scared to find out. She smiled gently. That's the shadow's room. And your dream just gave you the map. He paused. You think I should open it? I think you already started. That afternoon, he couldn't shake the feeling, like his whole body was remembering something his mind still didn't understand. He started journaling, trying to piece together the fragments. What was behind the door? A memory, a feeling, or just the belief that opening it would destroy him, and then it hit him. It wasn't about what was inside. It was about what he believed would happen if he looked, because for most of his life, avoidance felt safer than truth, denial more comforting than honesty. But now that he had seen the door, he couldn't unsee it. He kept imagining it, that rusted doorknob, his small hand reaching, not to break in, but to be let in. He wondered. What if opening the door didn't mean chaos? What if it meant reunion with the parts he left behind, the ones who waited patiently, in the dark? He didn't try to dream it again, but every night before sleep, he would close his eyes and whisper, I'm not ready to open it, but I know you're there, and I'm not ignoring you anymore. Sometimes healing doesn't start with courage. Sometimes it starts with noticing the door and promising you'll come back when you can. He took a weekend off. No phone, no TV, no music, just silence. He called it an experiment, but deep down, he knew it was a request, not from the world, but from within. Something inside him had grown tired of being drowned out, so he gave it space. The first few hours were easy. He cleaned, made tea, read a little, but by evening, the silence got louder. Thoughts surged, memories flickered. Doubt crept in. What are you even doing? This won't help. You're just wasting time. But he stayed with it, hour by hour, breath by breath, until the second night, sitting on the floor, candle lit, eyes closed, he heard it, not a voice, not words, but a feeling, like something leaning forward from the dark, and it didn't feel angry. It felt scared, lonely, like a child waiting in a hallway. He stayed still, didn't speak, just breathed, and then it whispered, please, don't leave me again. His eyes filled with tears, not because it hurt, but because it sounded familiar. It was the voice beneath the rage, beneath the silence, beneath the sabotage. A voice that didn't want to ruin things. It just didn't want to be forgotten. He didn't say much, didn't try to fix, just sat and felt. The candle flickered, the room held him. And for a moment, he wasn't alone, not because someone came, but because he finally did. He showed up, for himself, for the first time, and the silence. It stopped feeling empty. It started feeling sacred, because in that quiet, he found a voice, not shouting, just waiting. If you've ever feared the silence, maybe there's something sacred in it, something asking, will you hear me? If I whisper, integration isn't triumph. It's not the final scene in a movie. Not the moment the hero raises their fist in victory. It's quieter than that, messier, more human. Ethan learned this one morning sipping coffee alone, the light outside soft, his body calm. And yet inside something stirred, an old shame, not loud, but present. And this time, he didn't try to push it down, didn't chase it away with noise or logic. He just nodded, as if to say, I see you, you're allowed to be here. That was integration, not slaying the shadow, but making space for it at the table. His therapist had once said, imagine walking through life with a friend who never grew up, who only learned fear. And you kept telling them to shut up. What if instead you held their hand? Ethan had laughed then, but now it made sense. He didn't want to kill his rage or silence his sadness. He wanted to walk with them, to ask what they needed, to trust they weren't enemies, just parts of him that didn't know how to speak without screaming. That shift changed everything. At work, when he felt small, instead of overcompensating, he paused, listened, asked himself, What are you afraid will happen? And the answer came. They'll see I don't know everything. So he breathed, and let that be okay. In relationships, he stopped performing perfection. He started saying, I'm scared too, but I want to try. Sometimes that was enough. Other times it wasn't, but the difference, he wasn't abandoning himself anymore. He wasn't choosing silence over self, and slowly the shadow softened, not because it vanished, but because it was no longer alone. Integration, he realized, wasn't about arriving. It was about allowing, letting all his parts have a voice, even the broken ones, especially the broken ones, because they weren't broken at all, they were just unheard, and now they had someone who listened. If you've been trying to fix yourself, pause. Maybe what you need isn't another solution, but a seat, a breath, and a whisper. Here, let's walk together, all of us. Her name was Claire. They met at a bookstore, both reaching for the same novel. She smiled first, and something in him paused, not with fear, but with recognition. The way her eyes held softness, without demand. The way she asked questions, then actually listened. It was disarming. But gentle. They went for coffee, then walks, then weekends, and slowly, Ethan noticed something different. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to impress. He was just showing up. One night, as they sat on the couch, tangled in conversation, she asked, "Why do you always seem surprised when I stay?" He laughed nervously. "I guess I'm used to people leaving when I get real." She tilted her head. "And if they did, would that mean you were too much?" He didn't answer right away, but his chest tightened. Old reflex, old fear. But then he looked at her and said something he'd never said aloud. "I used to believe love meant danger, because it always came with pain, so I'd leave. Before it could leave me." She reached for his hand and didn't let go, not even when silence settled between them, not even when he couldn't look her in the eye. And in that stillness, he realized, the miracle wasn't that she stayed. It was that he didn't sabotage it, didn't push her away, didn't ghost himself out of his own life. He remained, imperfect, unsure, but present. They weren't perfect. There were days with tension, moments of retreat, but he kept showing up, not because he stopped being afraid, but because he stopped believing fear meant failure. And each time she didn't run, each time she chose patience, he healed a little more. He still had his shadow, still had thoughts that whispered, "You're too much, you'll ruin this too." But now he'd whisper back, "I hear you, but I'm not leaving, not this time." And that changed everything, because healing didn't look like being fearless. It looked like being honest, and not walking away when honesty got hard. So when Claire leaned into his shoulder one evening and said, "I'm glad you stayed," he didn't deflect, didn't joke, he just breathed, held her hand tighter, and said, "Me too." He sat by the window, rain tapping softly against the glass. In his hand was a letter. But this time it wasn't to rage, or shame, or fear. It was to someone he hadn't spoken to in decades. Dear Ethan, not the man, but the boy, the one with scraped knees and wild dreams, the one who stopped drawing, the one who learned silence because it felt safer than rejection. He wrote slowly, carefully, "Dear Ethan, I'm sorry for all the times I made you hide, for all the years I blamed you, for every moment I tried to fix you instead of love you. You weren't too much. You were never too much. You were just never heard. And I'm listening now." He paused, tears falling freely. No resistance, just release. This letter wasn't for closure. It was for reconnection, to remind himself that he was never broken, just divided, and the parts he once called bad or dangerous were only trying to survive, only trying to protect. He looked at the mirror again, not to inspect, but to see, really see, not just the man with stubble and tired eyes, but the boy, still waiting behind them. And for the first time, he didn't feel like a stranger to himself. He felt whole, not because everything was perfect, but because nothing was exiled anymore. The shadow wasn't gone. It walked beside him, sometimes whispering, sometimes yelling, but no longer in the dark, no longer alone. He folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, not to hide it, but to honor it, a reminder that healing is not erasing, it's remembering and returning. So if you've ever felt like your worst moments define you, if you've ever believed that the part of you who ruins things is a monster, maybe they're not. Maybe they're a mirror, reflecting the pain you haven't made peace with. And maybe now, it's time to stop running, to sit down, look your shadow in the eyes, and say, I see you, I hear you, you're welcome here, we're going home, together. If this story found something true in you, even if just a whisper, comment below, I see my shadow. Because sometimes, the smallest sentence can open the biggest door.